Hello everyone and welcome back to Sightless Fun, a podcast about board game accessibility for people who are blind and visually impaired. I am your host, Ertay, and joining me today are Laura and Dale Rowe from United Kingdom. Welcome to the show, guys. It's great to have you here.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for accepting. Really looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, me too.
Today, with Laura and Dale, we're going to focus on sighted assistance, which, in my opinion, at least in my experience, is one of the most important things when playing board games with someone who is blind. Before we get to our topic, Laura, why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Laura. I'm a singer, and I'm the mother of an 18-month-old daughter. I really enjoy music, performing and listening to it, and I'm very much into playing board games. And I'm also totally blind, and have been since I was 3 years old.
And is there anywhere we can listen to your music?
Yeah, I guess. If people are interested, they can look up a band called the Shining Levels. That's probably the most simple way of finding it.
Yeah, if someone wants to check it out, we'll post a link in the show notes.
Fantastic, much appreciated.
Fantastic. Yeah. How about you, Dale?
I have something to say in that I actually work in the board game industry myself. My day job is a game developer working for Mythic Games, who are known for, I guess, Joan of Arc, Time of Legends.
Awesome.
And other than board games, which is quite an obvious passion of mine, I'm also interested in like football and cinema, world cinema.
Like most Brits.
Yeah.
I mean football.
Yeah.
What's your usual day at work like?
Yeah.
What do you focus on?
So at the minute we have a game which we're working on called Solomon Kane, which was a game that ran on Kickstarter last year. And my day job is working within a team to develop that product and to play test it, to polish it, to think of new fun things. I have a qualification in digital game theory and design, and I used to heavily be involved and interested in digital games. But with Laura, we found that we couldn't play them together. And with that, I naturally converged to pick up analog games, tabletop games.
Right.
And that's where my interest flourished, with wanting to play with Laura.
Yeah, so that means that you introduced Laura to board games, am I correct?
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely.
Do you remember the first game, Laura, that Dale introduced you to?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know if it was the very, very first one, but certainly one of the first ones was Machikoro.
Oh, yeah.
And it really was quite special. We played it like many consecutive nights on my living room floor. And we really enjoyed it. And I don't think we had a dining table at the time. And from there, it just kind of spiraled. And not only did Dale introduce me to board games, he also introduced a lot of my friends, my sighted friends, to board games too. So, it kind of spread quite fast.
Like wildfire.
It did. Yes.
How often do you think you play? Do you play very regularly? And is it just like the both of you, or do you usually play with other friends?
Yeah, it generally is just the two of us. However, we do play with friends, but we go in kind of phases. So, for instance, we've played probably 4 games within the last week. Mm-hmm. However, sometimes we'll have a week where we don't play a game. Some weeks we play every night. So, I'd say we play what would be called fairly regularly. And maybe once a month we'll play a game with friends.
And away from Laura, I go to local meetups. So yeah, that's our general play sessions.
Yeah, that's very good. And do you currently have a favorite board game? I remember when I first spoke to you several months ago, you said that your current favorite board game of 2018 at least is Grand Austria Hotel.
Yes. Yeah, it's very close between that and the Lorenzo Il Magnifico. I don't know if you've heard of that one as well.
Yeah, I have. I haven't played it, but I have.
Yeah, I guess now I would say that my favorite game of 2018 was Lorenzo. A close second would be Grand Austria Hotel, of course, by the same designer, Simone Luciani. And yeah, I'm just a big fan. It creates really tight decisions, and it's really good in that it's fully accessible, I would say, to Laura. It has a lot of open information, and all I have to do is explain what's on the table, and Laura can make very tactical decisions based on that.
Right.
And it's a game I would never turn down. and actually, I would say it gets a lot of criticism for its lack of theme, I think. But for me, Lorenzo has quite good theme. It's very subtle, of course, and you have to do a bit of legwork and imagination. But I think it paints a really nice picture of the Renaissance Italy.
Is that the same? Like, is your favorite game the same game, or do you prefer something else?
I love both of those games, particularly Grand Austria Hotel. That, if you'd asked me last week, that would have probably been my favourite game. However, you've caught us mid St. Petersburg season. We've played 4 games of St. Petersburg recently, and it's 2-2 at the moment, and we need a deciding match.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that game. It's reminded me of how wonderful I think that is. I really like games where you have to be really efficient with money, and
Laura's really good at that as well.
So yes, I think I'm going to nominate St. Petersburg for my favourite game of the moment.
Yeah, and I usually ask people about their current favorite game, because I also don't have any particular all-time favorite so far. For a while it was Secret Hitler, but after 80 games I really starting to hate that game because I can't get my friends to play anything else. It's come on, let's try Codenames after 5 games of Secret Hitler. No, let's do just one more. I mean, come on, my head is going to explode.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were like with Machikoro. That's anything our other friends would play.
Yeah, absolutely. And with it being kind of the game that ignited people's interest in board games, it's definitely was our go-to game for a long, long time. So we've been subtly trying to steer our friends away from Machikoro onto other things.
But yeah, just out of interest, what is your current favorite game, would you say?
Current favorite game? Well, I don't know. Well, a solo game, probably the only one because I just started, is Deep Space D6. I got the print and play version.
Yeah.
And I have to use my phone a lot to use OCR, because solo gaming is very hard to do.
I can imagine that's
when you're blind.
Yeah.
Because so we are going to talk about sighted assistance, and if you remove sighted assistance, it becomes a bit tough. But interestingly enough, Deep Space D6 is actually quite accessible if you put a little bit of effort. Like if I have the cards written in an HTML list with headings, so I can easily navigate using my phone. And what I do is use Seeing AI on the iPhone, which has real-time OCR.
Yeah.
And it can also pick up some of the card text, but sometimes it misses some words, so it's a bit gibberish. But card titles can be picked up very easily, so then that's all I need. I just pick up the card title through the OCR reader and then just go through my list to check what the card actually is. And I'm guessing after several plays I'll just remember and won't require to do too much of scrolling on my phone. But yeah, that's one of the solo games that I'm currently playing and enjoying. As for
that's fantastic.
With other people, I guess Dice Forge is...
we like Dice Forge.
I really enjoyed Dice Forge. Yeah, the public information is great. I really like the player boards, because you can practically count your resources yourself.
They're beautiful, yeah.
That's a fantastic point.
You can be very independent, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I wish there was a way to make the dice accessible so one could feel them by touch. But at least it's not too many dice, it's just 2, and the person sitting next to you can just read the resources out to, and then you can just move your counters on your own player board. I think you also have that game.
Yeah, we're big fans of that.
Yeah, for very much the same reasons as well. Well, certainly from my perspective, I think the player board is really wonderful, and it's such a novelty for me to be able to track my own score.
Yeah.
And I really like that there's a enhanced level of independence that can be had
Absolutely
when you play that. And it's also just a really great game.
Yeah, I really love, that's what I like about deluxe editions and Kickstarters, is that in many times they have double layered or like indented player boards. And I wish that was just the standard, and Dice Forge does that. It's just standard.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's, we also talked with one of my previous interviews. I talked to a blind gamer from Canada, Ryan, and I remember when I asked him, like, what are some things that you would like publishers to do more? And I believe that was the first thing he said, like indented player boards.
Yeah.
If you have a tracker that needs to go somewhere, make a place for it where it will stick and won't move. But yeah, so I'm interested about your learning and, well, teaching process. Like, Laura, do you teach yourself board games, or do you have Dale assist you? Like, who is doing the teaching, or are you both doing it at the same time?
Yeah, it's invariably Dale who does the teaching. I've never taught myself a board game. I think just primarily because of his immense passion and knowledge for the genre. He tends to be the one that is selecting the games, and it's just in his nature to want to learn. Like Dale would read the rule books kind of just for fun before he starts to learn a game. So it's just kind of the natural thing for him to teach me how to play. I might
even have a dry run on my own.
Yeah, and that's just something that Dale enjoys to do, regardless of whether he's playing with a blind or sighted player. So I kind of am very lucky in that I have somebody who just really loves learning the rules of a game. So it's very natural for us that he would be the teacher. And I would, it's not in my personality type to sit and read rules. So I think it works really well for us, that dynamic.
Yeah, and Dale, how do you compare teaching board games to someone who is sighted versus someone who is blind?
Yeah, it's quite similar, and I think the primary difference is that when I teach to sighted people, when I'm explaining, I point to the board and I don't need to manipulate things as much. I don't need to show. But with Laura, I might pick up a resource and show it to her. I might read a card to give an example, and I go into more depth maybe, but otherwise it's very, very similar.
Right. In episode 6, when I talked to Richard, and he was focusing on teaching board games to the elderly. And one of the most important things that he said was to, when explaining a component, make sure you give them the component so they can touch it. Yeah. Even though if they can see it, so they can touch it, and just to get that tactile feedback.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite important. So, what are the most common accessibility challenges that you encounter when you're playing?
I think what comes immediately to mind is secret information, especially, there's only the two of us in the house, and dealing with any sort of cards that I have to keep a secret is something that needs a little bit of thinking.
For example, in Sagrada, each player has a secret colour that they get more points from, and the way in which we deal with that in terms of secret information is because the amount of cards is like only 5 or 6, we stack them artificially in alphabetical order from their colour, and I hand the deck to Laura, and she will choose the colour she wants to be.
Yeah, so I'll know what order they're in alphabetically, so I can think, I'll be green and and take the green card, I'll know that that is the second card in the pile, and Dale won't know what colour I am. So
and then I will shuffle the
That's
deck.
clever.
I will shuffle the deck and take one, and then therefore I do not know which one Laura's chosen, and Laura obviously doesn't know which one I have.
yeah, so it works the same. Just rather than it being randomly generated to me, I have an element of choice in there. And similarly in Suburbia, the secret objective tiles. So the way we do that is very similar. Dale will read out a list of secret objectives, and he will give me the tiles in that order, and I will choose which one I like the sound of.
Right.
In a similar way, knowing what order they're in. And then Dale will take the pile back, reshuffle them, and just take his own objective.
It's a quick and easy way just to get to the game quickly and have both have secret information.
Yeah, that's actually very clever. I mean, I'm guessing you haven't modified at least, well, those two games that you mentioned.
We haven't actually modified any in any kind of permanent way. We have used FaceTime, where I've video called my brother to ask him to read what a card says. I've also tried scanning cards, as I have I think it's called a SARA scanner. So you scan a printed document and it reads it out. However, it didn't really effectively pick up the text.
The symbols.
Yeah, and as Dale says, a lot of games have symbols or images to explain what you're doing. So we try to think of ways that don't involve technology to get around them.
Yeah, well, that's actually quite interesting. I honestly expected you to say yes and share some of the games that you have modified. But wow, that's awesome.
We've always thought about brailing up some Sushi Go or Keyforge decks, but we've never got around to it, and we've never experienced it.
No, we've kind of just improv'd, and it's always worked out okay. And I don't know. It has crossed our mind, but we've never got around to it, and it always just seems to work for us. So we've kind of just got these strange ways of going about playing things, and that's just our norm now, and works for us.
Yeah. So, well, you mostly rely on sighted assistance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I was playing another blind or visually impaired player, we wouldn't have a chance. We would just be guesswork.
Definitely.
Yeah, I guess I'm in a privileged position in that I have someone who's willing and able at all times to play these games with. So, so that's definitely impacted on our decision to not modify games. Yeah.
Well, from my experience, I've noticed that when playing with someone who is blind, well, both the person that is blind and the other person that's assisting require a lot of patience. I found out, like, as my sight deteriorated, that my patience had to increase, because sometimes it can be very frustrating because you used to do something much faster and now it's much slower.
Yeah.
But it's also for the person that's assisting, and like my brother is helping quite a lot, and for instance he knows like what I need. So what I was wondering is, Dale, like, have you noticed any improvements in efficiency the more you played with Laura?
That's a good question. I would say yes. I guess I'm more in tune to the information that Laura wants. Just as a quick example, Laura's at times not really interested in the flavor text, so that's something to skip over. Or it's better in playing the game of open information just to give the key mechanical information.
Yeah.
And so Laura is, I guess it's just a natural way that I've learned to play with Laura, and patience is a massive part of it, for sure.
Yeah. And Laura, have you ever played with some other people when Dale was not around?
It's a very rare thing, but yes, I have a few times.
Have you noticed like any difficulties or something similar?
I wouldn't say difficulties, because the people I would play with are friends that I've been friends with for many years. So again, are quite in tune with,
right,
and used to explaining things to me in other areas of of life. However, just playing with people who aren't perhaps as familiar with that particular game, they might not know which aspects of the game to focus on when giving the information. So if I ask for a recap of what's out in the market, I'm thinking Machikoro because that's probably what we've played. I say, so what's available in the market? They might, as Dale says, give me literally every bit of information on all of the cards, which then by the time they've got to the end, I've forgotten the first few. Yeah. Whereas Dale would just say, there's
I know what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. You just do a summary of the mechanical information, how much it costs, what it does,
and for example,
what colour it is, kind of thing.
And when Laura plays Machikoro, she never buys the red buildings. So I would know to give that information last.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
she hates stealing. I'm
really anti-stealing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You mentioned to me again when we first talked that you played Power Grid.
Yes.
And I remember also asking Ryan about it in a private conversation whether he has ever played that game, and he said that game requires, well, basically has some spatial aspect with connecting the, I believe it's cities.
Yeah.
And he said that he has played the card game variant, which basically removes the board, and that one is quite accessible because it's open information. But even though Power Grid has open information, that it can be troublesome. How do you deal with that in Power Grid?
Yeah, that is a really interesting question, because one of the genres of games that we find don't work with Laura when we play two players is games with maps. However, Power Grid does work for us, and I'll explain why. For example, I'm a big fan of the Voyages of Marco Polo, which uses a map as well.
Yeah.
However, for me, that map is non-linear. A sighted player will have to look at the map and think of the best route through and to plan the resources accordingly. However, with Power Grid, even though the map is similarly, you can kind of go anywhere you want. For me, because it's quite a tight economical game, for me, the map becomes, when I tell Laura that, look, you can go to this city, or you can go to this city over there. The key information that I need to tell her is just the connection costs. And if one costs 7 and another costs 13, the information becomes quite easy for Laura, because if she's sitting there with 9 money, then the decision becomes obvious. But of course, if she has enough money to go to both, then I would then tell Laura that, look, if you go to the space that costs more money now, when you get there, the next connection will cost 0 or 2. And then so the total cost would be 15. However, if she chose the first option, which is cheaper now, it would then become more expensive later. And essentially what I want to say is that with Power Grid's map, the way the decision tree sprouts is that it can be given to Laura, and she can then use that information quite succinctly. It's not an overload of information. It's just based on which is cheaper at this moment and which can be cheaper in the future.
Yeah, and it's actually one of our favourite games, and it did come as a bit of a surprise because, as Dale says, a lot of the games that revolve around maps and kind of travelling around a board have
area control.
Yeah, that's it. Have proved like really tricky in the past, but it does seem quite condensed. It just, as Dale explained, to kind of hone in on the area you're currently in and your resources you've got. So we found it quite manageable, and we've played it quite a lot, and it is kind of one of our favourites as well. So we really like it.
And Laura's really good at it as well. The thing about Power Grid, because I know it's a bit of a surprise if you say that's accessible for a blind player, is that even a sighted player would never make a rash decision to build on one side of the map and then pay a massive connection fee to get to the other. Their decision space is limited to quite a small circle of 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4 options. And I believe that information can be given effectively to a blind player. And then that blind player can make a tactical choice based on the 1 to 4 options.
No, it's very, very interesting. I wonder if there are other blind players out there that play this game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my next question is, have you ever picked up a game and that you found that you couldn't play afterwards? Or do you spend a lot of time like researching before you pull the trigger?
Yeah, so even though I do quite a lot of research, there has been a couple where I thought it would be more accessible. And I guess as previously mentioned, The Voyages of Marco Polo was one of them. And I guess that was after playing Power Grid. I might have thought that a map game could be usable, but it turned out it wasn't. Because the way the map works there is a bit less linear. A player really does have to look at the board and think strategically. But a bit more interestingly, another genre of games that didn't work as well as I would have thought is dexterity games. I don't know if you've experienced that yourself.
Yeah, dexterity games, I only have Jenga.
I see.
Yeah.
And I haven't played it since I lost the majority of my sight. Yeah. I probably should give it a shot.
Yeah, so I bought a couple of dexterity games thinking, it's very tactile. All the pieces are on the table to be manipulated. But when we tried to play a dexterity game, for example, Dungeon Fighter, a game where you have to throw dice onto a little target, it just became apparent that it was just not accessible at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, so that one was obviously quite inaccessible because it had the element of you were trying to hit a target.
Even though you could feel the target.
Even though I could feel the target for reference, it was still just the visual aspect was just too much for me to have an equal shot at that. But then also dexterity games that rely on, like you referenced Jenga, kind of building. I thought they would be really accessible, as Dale said, really tactile. However, once the thing that you're building gets too wobbly, you need a bit of visual input.
Yes, that's true.
You'll knock the thing over otherwise if you're kind of feeling for it.
True.
You'll end up wobbling your pieces and knocking them over.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of a bit of a shock realization that games that require a lot of pieces and manipulating of those pieces can be tricky because they're not steady enough to investigate with your hands and you'll knock them over.
Mm-hmm.
How about any stories? Have you been to any conventions? Unless I'm mistaken, you were the couple that met Rahdo at Essen, I believe, who suggested Castles of Burgundy.
Yeah, we did meet Rahdo. It was at the UK Games Expo in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And just in June last year. And we approached him and we sort of asked him what game he would recommend for a totally blind player. Playing with a sighted player, and he took the question really earnestly. He really did. He didn't have an answer straight off. He had to really think about it, and he kind of stood for about 10 minutes with his phone looking through his lists. Yeah, and really thinking about it, and he recommended Castles of Burgundy, which we haven't played yet. We haven't yet played. No, we should. Sorry, Rahdo.
To be honest, I'm waiting for the recently announced reprint of Castles of Burgundy.
Yeah, the deluxe edition. Do you have any interesting stories from a convention?
So we've attended 2. We went to Aircon, which was in Harrogate in the UK, in the north of the UK. And then we went to the UK Games Expo in Birmingham in England and really enjoyed both. Had a fantastic time. As for stories, when we attended Aircon, we were playing Mystic Vale, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what we're playing? Yeah. And I guess this is just a story about people's surprise at encountering a blind board game player. So Dale and I were playing Mystic Vale, in like a public hall with other games going on around us. And this guy came up to us and sort of said, sorry to interrupt you, but I needed to chat to you. I've just been watching you. And he was I think the word is moved by watching us play Mystic Vale. He was really, really quite moved by it. And he was saying, oh, this is wonderful. I just never would have thought a blind player could, a blind person could play this game. And and he chatted to us for ages and he was very interested. And I guess, it's a similar thing happened at UK Games Expo in Birmingham, in that we were at a stall. A woman was exhibiting her own game, which was a 3D game.
Ah, yes.
The name escapes me. Do you remember that?
I don't know the name.
No. So it's a 3D game, so we were naturally quite interested in this. So I went to have a look at it. And the woman, I think it was evident that the woman was quite assumed that I wasn't there to play games as a blind person. She kind of offered me to look at the dice she had and was like, oh, do you want to shake this dice? It'll make a really nice sound. You'll probably enjoy listening to the sound. And just her behaviour around me suggested that she in no way thought that I was at the UK Games Expo as a player of a game, and that I must have just been there with Dale. So I think, so those two stories are just kind of really to illustrate how I think it is kind of considered to be an inaccessible genre, even by people who are heavily immersed within board games.
Yeah.
And did you get to see any other blind players there? Did you meet anyone else?
I don't think we've ever met a blind or visually impaired
no, we haven't.
player.
We haven't.
No.
Oh, no.
No, I don't think we have.
Because this is what I asked Nancy. She was recently at OrcaCon in the US, and she says, no, I didn't. I'm like, no, we shouldn't say that you don't meet blind players. We need to say that there are more of us, so that publishers worry a bit more about accessibility.
I wish they did.
Absolutely. Well, this guy who was at Aircon, who was moved by us playing Mystic Vale, he said he was designing a game, and that seeing us play had made him think about whether his game would be accessible to a blind player. So if you are a blind player or visually impaired person, maybe we should make more of an effort to get in the way of designers and kind of show that we exist. But because you're right, we need to be thought of a little bit more.
Absolutely. And about the positive aspects of being a blind gamer as well.
Yeah, I think it isn't the case that it's a totally inaccessible thing and that blind people wouldn't enjoy it. It's definitely something that lots of blind people
for me, it's always surprising that how many games on our shelf are fully accessible.
Yeah.
With a couple of adaptations.
And sighted assistance, of course.
Yeah. And I mean, in general, like for people who are blind or people that lose their sight later in life, they tend to get more socially isolated. And board games is something that can have them ask people to come over or go at other people's houses and improve social interaction, basically.
Completely. And I think for me, I think I really look forward to when our daughter is older. So our daughter is sighted and she will inevitably be exposed to forced to play a lot of board games. And I think that her experience, not only of just playing board games, but playing with a blind player, will really be beneficial to her in kind of exploring ways of explaining to me and sharing information and communication skills. And I do think that playing with a blind person is really mutually beneficial,
It teaches patience.
It does. And brings something different out of the game, and it maybe enables you to view the game in a way that you wouldn't have done previously if you didn't have that blind person at the table. So I think it is a mutually enjoyable and beneficial thing to be doing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And when publishers pay attention to that, Like, I think it's great when games have shaped resources instead of just basic wooden cubes, because not only does it make it more accessible, but it makes the game visually and aesthetically pleasing as well. So it's win-win.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's win-win for the publishers and the games.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have any advice for couples like yourselves, basically, where one person in the couple is blind and the other is sighted?
I guess communication is the key, and what works for us might not work for another couple. But so it's figuring out, how much talking you want the sighted person to do, because some people might just want the bare minimum of information communicated. Others might want a lot more. Others might want their hand taken around the board to have a visualization of what's in front of them. Others might not. So I guess it's just kind of literally feeling your way together to working out what works for you. And I guess my main point would be that it can work, and it does work, and it's a really wonderful hobby. And it just takes a little bit of patience and time and creativity to find your way. What would you say, Dale?
Yeah, my only advice would just be not to be put off by like other people saying that such and such games not accessible. I think there's many games accessible out there.
So we're slowly coming to the end of the episode, and I would like to ask you, if some of our listeners want to get in touch with you, is there anywhere they can find you, either on social media or maybe they can reach you with email?
Yeah, we have an email, and funnily enough, a while ago, last year, we started our own small podcast. And we haven't published it yet. It's just
about to be released.
Yeah, we have several recordings to be published. And so we have an email related to that if they want to get in contact. And the email is cardboardjukebox@gmail.com. And just to give an idea what it is, it's quite a small podcast, in that each episode will only be 10 to 15 minutes. And the first 5 minutes is just us talking about a game that we've just played. We start recording as soon as we finish the game. We don't plan our thoughts, we just start recording. And the second half of the show is I hand over to Laura, because her speciality is music. And we talk about, we try to pick 3 songs that would work as a playlist with the board game.
Awesome. So before we go, do you have any final thoughts, anything you would like to add? Just
thank you very much for talking to us, and we've really enjoyed it, and encourage anybody who's blind or sighted or visually impaired to get in touch if they just want to say hello or share any experiences or give us any recommendations.
Mm-hmm. If anyone has any tips of how to make Voyages of Marco Polo work for a blind player, then I'm all ears, because I love the game and Laura doesn't. So if anyone has any advice of how to make that game more accessible with sighted assistance, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and just we were just always keen to hear about other people who love board games. So just say hello if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll absolutely ask some of our friends I met, blind friends that play board games online, whether some of them have played Voyages of Marco Polo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And get back to maybe we will find someone.
Yeah.
Dale, Laura, thank you very much for joining the show. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions for me, you can email me at sightlessfun@outlook.com. You can also find me on Twitter @sightlessfun, or you can check out our website at www.sightless.fun. Thank you very much for listening, and remember, you can still have fun while being sightless. This episode was hosted by Ertay and edited by Alpay. We'd also like to extend our special thanks to Fighting Windmills for allowing us to use their music in our podcast. You can find them at fightingwindmillsmk.bandcamp.com.